Sophia Brooks had exactly 4 minutes before she was supposed to walk down the aisle. She never made it. Because in a quiet hallway behind the church, she heard her fiancé say the one sentence that would end her marriage before it even began. Sophia Brooks stood in front of the mirror in the bridal suite, smoothing the lace at her waist for the 3rd time. Her hands were shaking, but not from nerves. She had waited 4 years for this day, and every part of it felt like it belonged to someone else's fairy tale, one she had somehow been lucky enough to land in. She reached for the small envelope on the vanity, a letter she'd written to Liam the night before, full of every reason she loved him. She wanted to slip it into his jacket pocket before the ceremony, a quiet surprise before 300 people watched them promise forever to each other. She stepped into the hallway, her heels quiet against the old wood floor, humming the song they'd chosen for their first dance. The hallway outside the groom's dressing room was narrow, lined with old photographs of weddings long past. Couples who had once stood exactly where she now stood, certain of everything ahead of them. Sophia slowed as she approached, expecting to hear Liam laughing with his groomsmen the way he always did before anything important, a nervous habit he'd had since college. Instead, she heard 2 voices, low and urgent, coming from behind a door left slightly open. One was Liam's, the other, unmistakably, belonged to her mother, Patricia. Sophia froze mid-step, one hand still holding the envelope. It didn't make sense. Patricia wasn't supposed to be back here. She was supposed to be seated in the 2nd row, dabbing her eyes the way mothers do. Sophia leaned closer without meaning to, telling herself she must have misheard. "She can't find out today," Liam was saying, his voice tight in a way Sophia had never heard from him. "Not like this. Not in front of everyone." Patricia's voice cut back, sharp and pleading. "There's no more waiting, Liam. After today, it's too late to change anything." Sophia's chest tightened. She told herself there was an explanation, a seating chart problem, a bill nobody wanted to mention before the ceremony. But then her mother said the words that made the envelope slip from Sophia's fingers and land silently on the carpet. "Your father cannot know you're doing this. Not until after the vows." Sophia's breath caught. Her father had passed 3 years earlier. There was no one left to protect from that name, except one person, and that person was standing in her wedding dress in the next room. For 7 full minutes, Sophia stood frozen against the wall, listening to fragments of a conversation that unraveled everything she thought she understood about her family. She heard her mother mention money. She heard Liam's voice crack, apologizing for something he called necessary. She heard the name of a bank, a property, a signature that needed to happen quietly before the reception ended. None of it made sense as a single story, but together, the pieces formed the outline of something Sophia had never been meant to see. Her mind raced back through years of small moments, now rearranging themselves into something else entirely. She picked the envelope back up off the floor with a trembling hand, folded it in half, and pressed it into her clutch. Then she wiped her eyes, adjusted her veil in the reflection of a framed photograph on the wall, and walked back toward the bridal suite as though nothing at all had happened. By the time her bridesmaids found her, Sophia had already rebuilt her expression into something calm enough to fool them. Her best friend Rachel asked if she was ready, and Sophia said yes, her voice steady in a way that surprised even herself. She looked at her reflection one final time, at the woman in white who appeared, on the surface, to be the happiest bride in the world. She thought about her father, about the store, about every quiet sacrifice her mother had made since his passing, and something inside her hardened into resolve. Whatever was happening behind that door, she would not let it be decided without her. She would walk down that aisle exactly as planned, and she would find out everything before the night was over. Before we go further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Sophia Brooks had grown up believing her family was simple in the best possible way. Her father, Robert, ran a small hardware store on Maple Street for over 20 years, the kind of place where he knew every customer's name and let people pay him back the following week if they were short. Her mother, Patricia, worked as a school receptionist, greeting anxious kids and frustrated parents with the same patient smile every single morning. Money was never plentiful, but it was never the subject of arguments either. Sophia remembered Sunday dinners where her father told stories about the store, her mother laughing at jokes she'd already heard 100 times. When Robert passed away from a heart condition 3 years before the wedding, Sophia watched her mother hold the family together with a quiet strength that never once looked like it might break. In the weeks after the funeral, Sophia remembered how her mother insisted on keeping the store open, showing up every morning at 7 despite having no experience running the register or managing the books. Sophia offered to help, but Patricia always waved her off, saying she needed to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet the way Robert would have wanted. Looking back, Sophia would wonder how much of that insistence had been pride, and how much had been an attempt to hide how badly things were already slipping. At the time, she only saw a grieving mother determined to honor her husband's legacy, and she admired her for it. She had no reason to imagine that admiration was built on a story that wasn't entirely true. She met Liam Coleman 2 years after her father's death, at a mutual friend's birthday dinner where he'd made an embarrassingly bad joke about the restaurant's wine list. He worked in insurance underwriting, steady and unglamorous, but reliable in the way Sophia had learned to value after watching her mother rebuild a life from nothing. Liam was thoughtful in small ways, remembering which coffee order was hers, showing up early to help her move apartments without being asked. Over dinners with Patricia, he was polite and attentive, often staying late to help with dishes while the two of them talked in the kitchen, their voices low, their laughter easy. Sophia used to joke that her mother liked Liam more than she liked her own daughter. Looking back, she would realize that comment carried more truth than she ever intended. Liam proposed on a Sunday afternoon in the backyard of Patricia's house, the same yard where Sophia had grown up chasing fireflies with her father. Patricia cried through the entire proposal, more visibly than Sophia herself did. And at the time, Sophia assumed it was simply the joy of watching her only daughter find happiness again, after years of grief. Liam asked Patricia for her blessing beforehand, a gesture that made Sophia fall in love with him even harder. And Patricia had said yes so quickly it seemed almost rehearsed. Sophia didn't think anything of it then. She only remembered feeling grateful that the 2 people she loved most in the world seemed to love each other too, in the easy, uncomplicated way families are supposed to. In the months before the wedding, Sophia noticed small things she chose not to examine too closely. Liam and Patricia would occasionally step outside during family dinners, saying they needed to discuss seating arrangements or vendor deposits. Their conversations would stop abruptly whenever Sophia walked into the room, replaced by unconvincing small talk about flowers or photographers. Once, she saw a bank statement addressed to her mother sitting open on Liam's kitchen counter, and when she asked about it, he said it was nothing, just paperwork he was helping Patricia sort through, since he understood finances better than she did. Sophia let it go, the way people do when they've built a life around trusting someone completely. She had no reason yet to imagine that trust was misplaced. The wedding planning consumed everyone's attention, and any unease she felt got folded quietly into the excitement of centerpieces and dress fittings. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sophia's aunt mentioned offhand that she'd driven past the old hardware store and noticed the windows were papered over, the sign taken down. Sophia had asked her mother about it that same evening, and Patricia had explained, without missing a beat, that the new owners were simply renovating before reopening under a different name. Sophia remembered feeling a small flicker of unease at how quickly and smoothly the answer came. But she was 3 weeks from her wedding, buried in seating charts and final fittings, and she let the feeling pass without chasing it further. She would think back to that conversation many times in the months that followed, wondering how many other smooth, quick answers she had simply accepted without question. Standing in the hallway with her mother's words still echoing in her ears, Sophia faced a decision that would define the rest of her life. She could walk back into that room, confront them both in front of the wedding party, and let the ceremony collapse before it began. She could call off the wedding entirely, canceling the vendors, disappointing the guests already seated, walking away with her dignity intact but her heart in pieces. Or she could do something neither of them would expect. She smoothed her dress, checked her reflection one final time, and walked down the aisle exactly on schedule, smiling at every face turned toward her, including the two people who had no idea she now knew their secret. Her father's brother, Uncle Mike, walked her down the aisle in Robert's place, and Sophia remembered gripping his arm just a little tighter than necessary, grounding herself in the one certainty she had left. The church was full, the afternoon light falling gently through the stained glass, and every face turned toward her wore an expression of pure, uncomplicated joy. She searched the crowd briefly for her mother's face and found it in the second row, tears already forming, an expression Sophia now studied for anything false and found, to her frustration, indistinguishable from genuine emotion. She reached the altar and took Liam's hands, and for one brief moment, standing this close, she almost convinced herself she had misunderstood everything she'd heard in that hallway. Throughout the ceremony, Sophia said her vows with a steadiness that surprised even herself. She watched Liam's hands as he slid the ring onto her finger, noticing for the first time how they trembled slightly, something she would have once mistaken for nerves. She caught her mother dabbing her eyes in the front row, and where she once would have read that as pride, she now wondered how much of it was guilt. Every photograph taken that afternoon captured a bride who appeared radiant and unaware, while inside, Sophia was cataloging every detail of the conversation she'd overheard, piecing together fragments like a puzzle she intended to finish before the night was over. She had decided that if there was a truth being hidden from her, she would find all of it before anyone else got the chance to control the story. As the officiant pronounced them married, Sophia kissed Liam and smiled for the photographers, and in that same instant, some small, cold part of her mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning exactly how she would spend the next several hours. She would not accuse anyone without proof, not yet. She had learned that much from watching her father run his business for 2 decades, that accusations without evidence only give the guilty room to explain themselves out of consequences. She needed the letter, the account number, the signature, something undeniable. The reception hall was already being prepared a few miles away, string lights and centerpieces arranged by hands that had no idea what the bride now knew, and Sophia intended to use every minute of that celebration to gather what she needed. During the cocktail hour, while guests mingled with champagne and appetizers, Sophia slipped away under the pretense of freshening up. Instead, she found her mother's coat check ticket and, with hands that had gone steady with purpose, checked the pocket of the coat Patricia had worn earlier that day. Inside was a folded letter from a bank, referencing a property transfer and a signature deadline of 5 o'clock that evening. She recognized the address on the letter immediately. It was her late father's hardware store, the one her mother had told her was closed and sold years ago to cover medical bills. Nothing about that story had ever fully added up, and now Sophia understood why. She photographed the letter with her phone and returned the coat exactly as she'd found it, her mind now racing through years of half-truths she had never questioned. She continued searching, moving quickly and quietly through the coat check room while the band played faintly down the hall. In an inside pocket of Liam's suit jacket, hung neatly beside her mother's coat, she found a folded printout of an email exchange between Liam and a bank representative named Deborah Hayes, discussing a wire transfer scheduled for that same evening. The email referenced Patricia's name repeatedly, and one line in particular made Sophia's stomach drop, a mention of needing the transfer finalized before Sophia has any reason to check the account. She read it twice to make sure she understood it correctly, then photographed it alongside the letter. Whatever this was, it had clearly been planned for weeks, possibly longer, and it had been planned around her, not with her. If you're still with us, comment. I'm still watching. We'd love to know who's been here since the beginning. Sophia returned to the reception with a practiced smile, greeting guests, posing for photographs, cutting the cake with Liam's hand over hers as the room applauded. Nobody watching would have guessed that underneath the celebration, she was running calculations, deciding exactly when and how to bring everything into the light. She thought about waiting until the wedding was over, taking Liam aside privately, giving her mother the chance to explain herself away from prying eyes. But every time she looked at Patricia across the room, laughing with relatives, accepting congratulations as though nothing at all was wrong, Sophia felt something inside her harden further. Her mother had spent months rehearsing this performance. Sophia decided she deserved to watch it end in front of the very people it had been performed for. The full truth came out during the reception, in front of every guest who had gathered to celebrate what they believed was a simple, happy union. Sophia stood, tapped her glass gently, and asked for everyone's attention before the toasts began. She thanked her guests for coming, thanked her late father for the values he'd given her, and then, calmly, without raising her voice, she read aloud the letter she'd found in her mother's coat, followed by the email from Liam's jacket. The room went silent. Patricia's face drained of color. Liam reached for Sophia's hand, but she stepped back, asking him instead to explain, in front of everyone, why he had been helping her mother quietly transfer ownership of her father's store without ever telling her. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Guests who had been laughing minutes earlier now sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths, unsure whether to look away or keep watching. Liam finally stood, his voice shaking, and admitted that everything Sophia had read was true. Patricia buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking, and for the first time in Sophia's memory, her mother looked genuinely small. Rachel, seated at the front table, reached for Sophia's hand under the table, a small gesture of support that Sophia gripped tightly without looking away from the two people who owed her an explanation. The band, unsure what else to do, had quietly stopped playing somewhere in the middle of the confrontation, leaving only the sound of Sophia's voice and the low murmur of 300 stunned guests. The truth, when it finally surfaced, was more complicated than betrayal alone. Robert had left the hardware store to Sophia in his will, not to Patricia, a detail Patricia had kept hidden out of shame after quietly running the store into debt in the years following his death. She had taken out loans against the property without fully understanding the terms, made worse by a bookkeeper who had, unbeknownst to her, been skimming from the accounts for over a year before anyone noticed. By the time Patricia realized how deep the debt had grown, the store was months from foreclosure, and rather than admit the failure to her grieving daughter, Patricia had asked Liam, who worked in finance, to help her transfer the property title before Sophia ever discovered how much money had been lost. Liam explained, his voice barely steady, that Patricia had come to him nearly a year earlier, before he and Sophia were even engaged, begging him not to tell Sophia how bad things had become. He had agreed at first simply to help her sort out the paperwork, believing it was a temporary favor between a future son-in-law and his fiancé's mother. But as the debt grew and the deadlines closed in, Patricia convinced him the only way to save the store and spare Sophia the grief of watching her father's legacy be repossessed was to quietly transfer it into a trust before anyone outside the family could seize it. Liam had agreed, believing he was protecting Sophia from a painful truth about her mother rather than betraying her outright. It didn't excuse the secrecy, but it reframed the story from simple deception into something rooted in fear, shame, and a mother desperate to shield her daughter from disappointment. Sophia asked her mother directly, in front of everyone, why she hadn't simply told the truth from the beginning. Patricia, through tears, admitted that after Robert died, the store was the last piece of him she had left to protect, and she couldn't bear the thought of Sophia seeing her fail at preserving it. She said she had told herself, over and over, that she would explain everything after the wedding, once the trust was secured and the store was safe, believing she could still fix everything quietly before anyone got hurt. Sophia listened to all of it in silence, standing at the head table in her wedding dress, surrounded by guests who no longer knew whether to feel sympathy or shock. When her mother finished speaking, Sophia said only one thing before sitting back down, That love without honesty was just another kind of debt, one that always eventually came due. In the weeks following the wedding, Sophia and Liam worked slowly to rebuild what trust had been damaged, agreeing that secrets, even well-intentioned ones, had no place in a marriage built to last. Liam apologized repeatedly, not just for keeping the secret, but for underestimating how much it would cost Sophia to learn the truth in front of an audience rather than privately, from him. They spent long evenings talking through everything, Sophia asking questions she needed answered, Liam answering each one without flinching, even when the answers were unflattering. It wasn't easy, and there were nights Sophia wondered if the marriage could survive a beginning built on discovering a hidden lie. But slowly, through honesty that had been absent before, something steadier began to take its place. Sophia's relationship with her mother took longer to heal. She was angry, not only about the store, but about years of quiet lies dressed up as protection. And for nearly 2 months after the wedding, she barely spoke to Patricia beyond short, necessary phone calls. 6 months later, Sophia sat down with Patricia over coffee at the kitchen table where she'd grown up, and for the first time, her mother told her everything: the medical bills, the fear of losing her daughter's respect, the guilt that had followed her every day since Robert's death. Patricia admitted she had been so afraid of becoming a burden that she had chosen secrecy over asking for help, a decision she now recognized had cost her far more than the store ever could have. Sophia didn't forgive her all at once, but she understood her, and understanding, she realized, was where healing quietly begins. The hardware store never reopened the way it once had, but Sophia kept the sign above the door as a reminder of her father's name, storing it in the garage of the home she and Liam eventually bought together. A year after the wedding, Sophia and her mother began meeting for coffee every other Sunday, a small ritual that slowly rebuilt what had been broken, one honest conversation at a time. She learned that the people who hurt us are not always villains. Sometimes they are simply carrying weight they never learned how to put down, afraid that asking for help would make them seem weaker in the eyes of the people who loved them. Forgiveness, she came to understand, does not mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing not to let someone else's fear define the rest of your life. Now we'd love to hear from you. If you were Sophia, would you have confronted them the moment you overheard that conversation, or would you have waited, the way she did, to uncover the whole truth first? Do you believe some secrets, even the ones told to protect us, deserve forgiveness? Or are there lines that should never be crossed, no matter the reason behind them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely love reading your perspectives. If this story moved you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story about family, love, and the truths we sometimes hide from the people we love most.